The morning sky was gray and cold over Cedar Falls when people started arriving at Riverside Cemetery. Cars parked along the narrow road that led to the old section where the Hayes family plot waited under a big oak tree. John Hayes was finally coming home, but not the way anyone had hoped he would. Lisa Hayes stood near the fresh grave wearing her black dress, the one she had bought 3 days ago when the doctors told her there was nothing more they could do. She held a tissue in her shaking hands and watched as men from the funeral home carried the oak coffin from the hearse. Her husband of 20 years was inside that box, and she still could not believe he was really gone. The cancer had taken him fast, too fast for anyone to get ready for it. 6 months ago, John was working at his garage, fixing cars and joking with customers like he always did. Then came the headaches, then the tests, then the terrible news that changed everything. The doctors tried their best, but the disease was too strong and too quick. Max sat beside Lisa, his brown eyes watching every movement around the grave. The German Shepherd had been John's best friend for 8 years, ever since John came back from his last time fighting overseas. The dog was getting old now, his black and tan fur showing gray around his face, but his love for John never changed. For the past 3 days since John died, Max had barely eaten and would not leave Lisa's side. Pastor Williams opened his black book and began to speak about John's life. He talked about how John served his country with honor and came home to serve his community. The pastor told everyone how John fixed cars for people who could not pay full price, and how he helped his neighbors when they needed work done around their houses. He spoke about John's kind heart and his love for his family. The words were nice, but they felt empty too. Lisa. Nothing the pastor said could bring back her husband's laugh or the way he hummed while he worked in the garage. Nothing could replace the man who brought her coffee every morning and held her hand. While they watched television at night, about 50 people came to say goodbye to John. There were friends from the garage where he worked, neighbors from their street, and some of the men he served with in the army. Mrs. Patterson from next door brought flowers from her garden. Danny Rodriguez, who worked with John for 10 years, stood with tears running down his face. As Pastor Williams continued reading from his book, something strange happened. Max suddenly jumped up from where he was sitting and ran straight to the coffin. The dog's behavior changed completely in just a few seconds. He started barking, not the normal bark he used when someone came to the door, but a wild, desperate sound that made everyone stop listening to the pastor. The funeral director, Mr. Thompson, tried to grab Max's collar, but the dog pulled away. Max put his front paws up on the side of the coffin and kept barking, louder and more frantic with each sound. His whole body was shaking and his tail was not wagging at all. This was not the behavior of a sad dog missing his owner. This was something else, something that made the hair on people's arms stand up. Lisa walked over and tried to calm Max down, but he would not stop. She had never seen him act this way before, not even when thunderstorms scared him or when strangers came to the house. The dog seemed to be trying to tell everyone something important, something urgent that no one could understand. Dr. Helen Carter, the town's animal doctor, pushed through the crowd to get closer to Max. She had known John since they were children and had taken care of Max since John first brought him home. Helen knelt down and tried to examine the dog while he continued his frantic barking, but Max would not let her touch him. All his attention was focused on the coffin. The barking went on for several minutes while people stood around not knowing what to do. Some of the older ladies whispered that animals could sense things humans could not. Others said the dog was just upset because he knew his master was in the box. But Helen noticed something different about Max's behavior that worried her. Pastor Williams tried to continue with the service, raising his voice over Max's barking, but it was impossible to concentrate. The dog's distress was affecting everyone there. Lisa started crying harder, not just from sadness about John, but from confusion about why Max was acting so strange. Finally, Danny Rodriguez and 2 other men managed to grab Max and carry him away from the coffin. Even as they held him, the dog kept trying to get back to John, his paws scratching in the air and his voice getting hoarse from all the barking. They put him in Danny's truck where he could still see the funeral but could not interrupt anymore. From inside the truck, Max continued to bark and scratch at the windows. His eyes never left the coffin and his whole body showed panic and distress. It was as if he was trying to warn everyone about something terrible that was about to happen. The rest of the funeral service was uncomfortable for everyone. Pastor Williams finished his prayers and said the final words, but people kept looking over at the truck where Max was still making noise. When the time came to lower the coffin into the ground, the dog's barking became even more desperate. After the funeral ended and people started leaving, Helen Carter stayed behind with Lisa. Both women were troubled by what they had seen. Helen had been a veterinarian for 20 years and had never witnessed an animal react to death in such a way. Dogs grieved for their owners, but this was different. This felt like alarm, like Max was trying to prevent something bad from happening. As the cemetery workers began filling the grave with dirt, Max finally became quiet in the truck. But he did not relax. He sat perfectly still, staring at the spot where John was being buried as if he was waiting for something. His behavior had changed from frantic barking to intense watching, but the strange feeling around him did not go away. Lisa and Helen drove Max home that afternoon, both women silent and worried. The dog sat in the back seat, looking out the window toward the cemetery until they could not see it anymore. When they reached the house, Max went straight to John's favorite chair and lay down, but his eyes kept looking toward the door as if he was waiting for someone to come home. That night, Lisa could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Max's desperate barking in her head. The dog was restless too, walking from room to room and whining softly. Several times he went to the back door and scratched, wanting to go out, but when Lisa opened it, he just stood there looking in the direction of the cemetery. The next morning, Lisa woke up to find the back gate hanging open and Max nowhere to be seen. She called his name while walking around the yard, but the dog was gone. Her heart started beating fast because Max had never run away before, not once in all the years John had him. The dog was always good about staying in the yard and coming when called. Lisa got dressed quickly and drove to the cemetery, somehow knowing that was where she would find Max. Sure enough, when she arrived at Riverside Cemetery, there was Max sitting right beside John's grave. The dirt was still fresh and loose from yesterday, and Max had been digging at one end of the mound. His paws were muddy and he looked tired, but when he saw Lisa, he started barking again, just like at the funeral. The cemetery keeper, old Pete Johnson, came walking over, shaking his head. Pete told Lisa that Max had been there since sunrise, digging and making noise. Pete had tried to chase the dog away twice, but Max kept coming back. Each time Pete left, Max went right back to digging at the grave. Lisa put a leash on Max and took him home, but she could see the dog did not want to leave. All the way to the car, Max kept looking back at the grave and whining. When they got home, Lisa made sure the gate was locked tight and checked it twice. She thought maybe Max just needed time to understand that John was not coming back. But the next morning, the same thing happened. The gate was still locked, but Max was gone. This time Lisa found him at the cemetery even earlier, and he had dug a bigger hole in the loose dirt. Pete Johnson was not happy about it. He told Lisa she had to keep her dog at home or he would call the animal control people. Dr. Helen Carter arrived just as Lisa was trying to get Max back in the car. Helen had been thinking about the dog's strange behavior since the funeral and wanted to check on him. She watched Max for a few minutes and noticed that his digging was not random. The dog was focused on one specific spot at the foot of the grave, and he kept putting his nose down in the hole he had made. Helen asked Lisa if she could examine Max to make sure he was not sick. Sometimes animals acted strange when they were not feeling well, and grief could make dogs do unusual things. Lisa agreed because she was worried about Max too. The dog had barely eaten anything since John died, and his behavior was getting worse instead of better. At Helen's clinic, all the tests showed that Max was healthy. His temperature was normal, his heart sounded good, and he did not seem to be in any pain. But Helen noticed something interesting while she was examining him. Max's hearing seemed much sharper than usual. When Helen made very quiet sounds that most dogs could not hear, Max reacted right away. Helen remembered something John had told her a few weeks before he died. He had been having strange dreams and said he sometimes heard sounds that other people could not hear. At the time, Helen thought it was because of the medicine John was taking for his cancer, but now she wondered if there was something else going on. That evening, Helen could not stop thinking about Max's behavior. She decided to do something that might sound crazy to other people. She called her friend Dr. Alan Ross, who worked for the government studying unusual things. Helen told Alan about Max and asked if he could bring some special equipment to the cemetery. Alan was curious enough to drive down from the city the next day. He brought a machine that could see underground using sound waves, the same kind of equipment archaeologists use to find old buried things. Helen thought maybe there was something under John's grave that was making Max act so strange. They met at the cemetery just before sunset, when no other people were around. Pete Johnson had gone home for the day so they could work without being bothered. Alan set up his machine near John's grave while Helen held Max on a leash. The dog became excited as soon as they got close to the grave, pulling toward the spot where he had been digging. The machine made beeping sounds as Alan moved it over the ground. For most of the grave area, the readings were normal, showing just dirt and the coffin where they expected it to be. But when Alan moved the machine over the spot where Max had been digging, something very different appeared on the screen. There was an object under the ground that was not supposed to be there. It was not part of the coffin or anything else that should have been buried with John. The shape on the screen looked like a box or case, and it was giving off some kind of signal that the machine could detect. Even stranger, the signal seemed to be getting stronger as they watched. Helen and Alan looked at each other, both thinking the same thing but not wanting to say it out loud. Someone or something had put an object in John's grave, either before or after the burial. The object was clearly not natural, and it was active in some way that their equipment could measure. Max was pulling harder on the leash, trying to get to the exact spot where the machine showed the object. The dog's behavior suddenly made sense. He could hear or sense something that humans could not detect without special equipment. Whatever was down there was calling to Max in a way that no one else could understand. Alan took pictures of the readings and packed up his equipment. He told Helen that they needed to be very careful about what they did next. If there was really something unusual buried with John, it could be dangerous or illegal or both. They needed to think about who to tell and how to handle the situation. Driving back to town, Helen felt scared and excited at the same time. Part of her wanted to pretend the whole thing never happened and just try to keep Max away from the cemetery. But another part of her needed to know what was down there and why it was affecting the dog so strongly. That night, Helen called Lisa and asked her to come to the clinic in the morning. She did not want to explain everything over the phone, but she needed Lisa to know what they had found. As John's wife, Lisa had the right to make decisions about what should happen next. Max escaped again that night, even though Lisa had put him in the house and locked all the doors. In the morning, she found him at the cemetery again, but this time he was not digging. He was lying down with his head over the hole he had made, as if he was listening to something. When Lisa called to him, Max looked up with an expression she had never seen before. The dog looked hopeful, as if he knew something good was about to happen. Helen arrived at the cemetery while Lisa was still trying to convince Max to come with her. After seeing the dog's behavior again, Helen made a decision that would change everything. She told Lisa about the underground object and showed her the pictures from Alan's machine. Then she asked Lisa a question that seemed impossible but necessary. Would Lisa consider letting them dig up John's grave to see what was really down there? Helen explained that whatever was buried with John was affecting Max in ways they did not understand. The dog was trying to tell them something important, and the only way to find out what it was would be to look. Lisa stared at the pictures for a long time without saying anything. The idea of disturbing John's grave felt wrong and scary, but Max's behavior was getting worse every day. The dog was not eating, not sleeping, and spending all his energy trying to get back to the cemetery. If they did not do something soon, Lisa was afraid she would lose Max too. Finally, Lisa nodded and said she wanted to know what was happening to her husband and her dog. Helen called Alan and told him to come back with more equipment and some people who could help them dig carefully. Whatever was down there had been waiting for 3 days, and it was time to find out what Max had been trying to tell them all along. The digging started before dawn on Saturday morning. Alan Ross brought 3 other people with him, all wearing plain clothes but carrying official-looking equipment. They told Lisa and Helen to call them scientists, but something about the way they acted made it clear they worked for the government in ways that were not supposed to be talked about. Pete Johnson was not happy about people digging up graves in his cemetery, but Alan showed him papers that made the old man step back and agree to let them work. Pete was told to stay away from the Hayes plot until further notice and not to talk to anyone about what he saw. The digging was slow and careful. The men used small tools instead of big shovels, and they had machines that could detect different materials in the soil. Every few minutes they would stop and check their instruments, making sure they did not damage anything important that might be buried there. Max sat with Lisa and Helen about 20 feet away, watching everything with intense attention. The dog had stopped barking but remained alert, his ears up and his eyes focused on the grave. As the men dug deeper, Max became more excited, but in a quiet way that showed he was waiting for something specific to happen. After 2 hours of digging, they reached John's coffin. The men carefully cleared the dirt from the top and sides, checking for anything unusual. Everything looked normal until they started examining the area around the coffin. At the foot end, exactly where Max had been digging, they found something that made everyone stop working. There was another box buried below John's coffin, something that definitely had not been there during the burial. The object was about the size of a briefcase but made of material that looked like metal and glass mixed together. Strangest of all, it was glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. One of Alan's men used a device that measured radiation and other dangerous things. He shook his head and told everyone the object was not harmful to be around, but it was definitely not made by any technology he recognized. The material did not match anything in their databases, and the energy readings were unlike anything they had seen before. Helen moved closer to get a better look while the men worked to carefully remove the strange object from the ground. As they lifted it, Max suddenly stood up and made a sound that was part whine and part bark. The dog was not afraid of the glowing box, but he seemed to recognize it somehow. The object was smooth and warm to the touch, despite being buried in cold ground for several days. The blue light inside seemed to move and flow like liquid, creating patterns that were almost too complex to follow with human eyes. None of the instruments could identify what was making the light or what was powering the device. But the most shocking discovery was still to come. When the men carefully opened John's coffin to check for any connection between him and the strange object, they found something impossible. John's body showed no signs of decay or change, even though he had been dead for 4 days. His skin still had color, his muscles were not stiff, and he looked like he was sleeping instead of dead. Dr. Helen Carter had seen many dead animals in her work as a veterinarian, and she knew what death looked like. What she was seeing in John's coffin was not death as she understood it. She asked one of Alan's men if she could check for vital signs, even though it seemed crazy to do so. Using a small device that could detect the faintest heartbeat, Helen placed it on John's chest. For a few seconds, nothing happened, and she felt foolish for even trying. Then the device started beeping, very slowly and quietly, but definitely picking up something. John Hayes had a heartbeat. Lisa screamed when Helen told her what the device was showing. It was impossible and terrifying and wonderful all at the same time. Her husband was supposed to be dead, but something was keeping his body alive in ways that no medical science could explain. Alan's team immediately set up more equipment around the coffin, measuring everything they could think of. They found that John's body temperature was slightly below normal but not cold like a dead person should be. His brain was showing small amounts of activity, and his blood was still moving through his veins, though very slowly. The strange glowing object seemed to be connected to John somehow, even though there was no visible link between them. When one of the men moved the object closer to the coffin, John's heartbeat got a little stronger. When they moved it away, the heartbeat became fainter again. Helen realized that the object was some kind of medical device, but not one made by human technology. It was keeping John alive and preserving his body using methods that were far beyond anything she had learned in medical school. The device was literally preventing death and maybe even reversing it. Max seemed to understand what was happening better than any of the humans did. The dog kept looking back and forth between John and the glowing object, as if he could see connections that were invisible to everyone else. When Helen let Max come closer to the coffin, the dog gently put his nose near John's hand and made soft whimpering sounds. Alan called someone on his phone and spoke in words that Lisa and Helen could not understand. After the call, he told them that more people would be coming to help study the situation. They would need to move John and the object to a place where they could do more detailed examinations. The idea of taking John away from the cemetery frightened Lisa, but Alan explained that leaving him in the ground was not safe for anyone. They did not know how the alien device worked or what might happen if it was disturbed by weather or animals. John needed to be in a place where doctors and scientists could monitor him properly. Helen asked the question that everyone was thinking, but afraid to say out loud. If the device was keeping John alive, did that mean he might wake up? Was it possible that her childhood friend was not really dead, but in some kind of deep sleep that could be reversed? Alan said they did not know enough to answer that question yet, but they would do everything possible to find out. The device was clearly designed to preserve life, and John's body was responding to it in ways that suggested healing, rather than just prevention of decay. As they prepared to move John's body in the strange object, Max became agitated again. The dog did not want to be separated from his master, and he seemed to understand that something important was happening. Helen convinced Alan to let Max come with them, explaining that the dog might be able to sense things about John's condition that their instruments could not detect. They loaded John's body into a special vehicle that looked like an ambulance but had equipment that Lisa had never seen before. The glowing object was placed in a separate container that kept it close enough to John to maintain whatever connection existed between them. During the drive to the government facility, Lisa sat beside John's body and held his hand. She could feel warmth in his skin and even a very faint pulse in his wrist. For the first time since the doctors told her John was dying, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, somehow, he might come back to her. Max rode in the front seat, his eyes never leaving the container that held the mysterious device. The dog seemed calmer now that John and the object were together again, as if he knew that whatever had been wrong was finally being fixed. At the facility, John was placed in a room filled with medical equipment that could monitor every part of his body. The alien device was positioned nearby, and immediately all the readings became stronger. John's heartbeat increased, his brain activity grew more active, and his body temperature started returning to normal. Helen watched the monitors all night, amazed by what she was seeing. John's body was healing itself from the inside out, repairing damage from the cancer and even fixing old injuries from his time in the military. Whatever technology was in that glowing box was far more advanced than anything humans had created. As dawn approached, something extraordinary happened. John's eyes moved under his closed eyelids and his fingers twitched slightly. The monitors showed that his brain activity was increasing rapidly, as if he was waking up from a very deep sleep. Max, who had been lying quietly beside John's bed, suddenly stood up and wagged his tail for the first time since the funeral. The dog could sense what the machines were just beginning to detect. His master was coming back. On the 7th day since John Hayes had been declared dead, his eyes opened for the first time. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping of medical machines and the gentle humming sound that came from the alien device. Early morning sunlight came through the window, making the blue glow from the strange object look even more mysterious. John blinked several times, as if he was trying to remember how to see. His eyes moved slowly around the unfamiliar room, taking in the medical equipment and the faces of people he did not recognize. For a moment he looked confused and a little frightened, like someone waking up in a place they had never been before. Then he heard a familiar sound that made everything else fade away. Max was whimpering softly, the happy crying sound he made when John came home from work. John turned his head toward the sound and saw his dog sitting beside the bed, tail wagging so hard his whole body was shaking. "Max," John said, and his voice was rough from not being used for a week. The word came out as barely more than a whisper, but it was enough to make Max stand up and put his front paws on the edge of the bed. The dog's eyes were bright with joy, and he made small barking sounds that seemed to say he knew everything would be okay now. Lisa had been sleeping in a chair beside the bed, and John's voice woke her up immediately. When she saw her husband looking at her with clear, aware eyes, she started crying so hard she could not speak. For a moment she was afraid to move, thinking that maybe she was dreaming and would wake up to find John still dead. "Hey there, beautiful," John said, using the same words he had said to Lisa every morning for 20 years. His voice was getting stronger, and he tried to sit up in the bed. "Why are you crying? And where are we? This doesn't look like our bedroom." Dr. Helen Carter, who had been monitoring John's condition all night, quickly came to check his vital signs. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. All of John's readings were not just normal, but better than normal. His heart was strong, his breathing was clear, and his responses to simple tests showed that his mind was working perfectly. "John, what's the last thing you remember?" Helen asked while she examined his eyes with a small flashlight. She needed to know if the experience had affected his memory or thinking ability. John was quiet for a moment, trying to sort through his thoughts. "I remember being in the hospital," he said slowly. "The doctors told me the cancer was getting worse and they couldn't do anything more to help. I remember saying goodbye to Lisa and telling Max to be a good dog and take care of her. Then I went to sleep and now I'm here." "How long was I asleep?" Helen and Lisa looked at each other, not sure how to explain what had happened. How do you tell someone they have been dead for a week and then brought back to life by alien technology? Alan Ross, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped into the room to help with the difficult conversation. "John, this might be hard to understand," Alan said carefully, "but you've been unconscious for 7 days. You were very sick and your body stopped working for a while. We found a way to help you get better, but it's going to take some time to explain everything." While the adults talked, Max had climbed onto the bed and was lying down next to John, being careful not to disturb any of the medical wires. John scratched behind the dog's ears and Max closed his eyes with contentment. It was clear that Max understood what had happened better than any of the humans did. Over the next few hours, Alan and Helen slowly told John about his death, the funeral, Max's strange behavior, and the discovery of the alien device. They showed him pictures of the glowing object and explained how it seemed to be connected to his recovery. John listened to everything with growing amazement, stopping them frequently to ask questions. The hardest part for John to accept was that he had actually died. He felt completely alive and healthy, better than he had felt in months before the cancer got bad. When Helen showed him the medical scans from before his death and compared them to his current condition, John could see that something extraordinary had happened to his body. The cancer that had been killing him was completely gone. Not just stopped or reduced, but gone as if it had never existed. Old injuries from his military service, including a back problem that had bothered him for years, were healed. Even small scars on his hands from working on cars had disappeared. "It's like I got a brand new body," John said, looking at his hands in wonder. "I feel stronger than I have in years. And my vision is clearer too. I can see things across the room that would have been blurry before." Dr. Helen ran more detailed tests and discovered that John's improvements went beyond just healing from disease and injury. His reflexes were faster than normal, his hearing was more sensitive, and his strength had increased significantly. The alien device had not just saved his life, but had enhanced his human abilities in ways that seemed impossible. The most remarkable change was in John's mind. He found that he could remember things more clearly than before, and he seemed to understand complex ideas more quickly. When Alan showed him technical diagrams of the alien device, John was able to point out details and patterns that trained scientists had missed. As the day went on, John began having strange experiences that were hard to describe. Sometimes he would stop talking in the middle of a sentence and get a distant look in his eyes, as if he was listening to something no one else could hear. When Helen asked him about it, John said he was having dreams while he was awake, but they felt more real than regular dreams. In these waking dreams, John saw images of vast space filled with stars and planets he had never seen before. He heard voices speaking in languages he did not recognize, but somehow he understood what they were saying. The voices were kind and gentle, and they seemed to be trying to teach him something important. Max seemed to sense when John was having these experiences. The dog would become very still and alert, watching John's face carefully. Sometimes Max would whine softly or put his paw on John's arm, as if he was trying to help his master stay connected to the mysterious voices. Helen noticed that the alien device reacted to John's mental state. When he was having the waking dreams, the blue light inside the device would pulse faster and brighter. When John was focused on the regular world around him, the light became steadier and dimmer. There was definitely a connection between John's mind and the strange technology. Alan's team ran tests on the device throughout the day, but they could not figure out how it worked or what materials it was made from. The technology was so far beyond human understanding that their instruments could barely measure its basic properties. What they could determine was that it was actively communicating with John's body and brain in ways that were completely unknown to medical science. That evening, John asked if he could try to communicate with whatever intelligence was behind the device. He felt that the voices in his dreams were trying to tell him something important, and he wanted to understand what they needed him to know. Helen was worried about the safety of such an experiment, but Alan thought it might be their best chance to learn about the alien technology. They set up additional monitoring equipment and had medical staff standing by in case anything went wrong. John sat quietly beside the glowing device and closed his eyes, trying to focus on the voices he had been hearing. Max lay down next to him, providing comfort and support. As John concentrated, the device began pulsing more rapidly and the blue light grew brighter. Suddenly, John's eyes opened, but he was looking at something far beyond the walls of the room. When he spoke, his voice had a different quality, as if he was repeating words that were being spoken to him from somewhere else. "They say their name is the Guardians," John said, in a voice that sounded both like himself and like someone else speaking through him. "They have been watching our world for a very long time, waiting for the right moment to make contact. They chose me not because I am special, but because I represent the best qualities they have seen in human beings." The room was completely silent except for John's voice and the humming of the alien device. Everyone present understood that they were witnessing humanity's first real communication with beings from another world. "They say that Earth is at a crossroads," John continued, still speaking with that strange dual voice. "Humanity will either learn to use its intelligence for good purposes, or it will destroy itself within the next few generations. The Guardians want to help, but only if humans can prove they are ready for the responsibility that comes with advanced knowledge." John paused for a moment, listening to voices that only he could hear. When he spoke again, his message would change the course of human history forever. John's connection with the Guardians grew stronger over the following days. Each time he communicated with them, he learned more about their ancient civilization and their reasons for watching Earth. The conversations happened mostly in his dreams, but sometimes the alien voices came through even when he was awake and talking to other people. The Guardians told John that they were not the first species to develop advanced technology, and they would not be the last. Throughout the galaxy, there were hundreds of worlds where intelligent life had grown and learned to travel between the stars. Some of these civilizations used their knowledge to help others and create peace. Others used their power to conquer and destroy, until they eventually destroyed themselves. Earth was being watched because humans were approaching the point where they would either join the peaceful civilizations or become another example of a species that could not handle its own power. The Guardians had seen this choice play out many times before, and they knew the signs of a world that was ready to make the right decision. According to the Guardians, humans had many qualities that made them promising candidates for joining the galactic community. They were curious and creative, able to solve problems in ways that surprised even advanced civilizations. Humans also showed remarkable loyalty and love, especially in their relationships with animals like the bond between John and Max. But humans also had dangerous tendencies that worried the Guardians. They fought wars over resources and ideas, they damaged their planet without thinking about the future, and they often chose short-term benefits over long-term survival. These were the same patterns that had led to the destruction of other promising species. The Guardians had been conducting small experiments on Earth for many years, helping individual humans in quiet ways to see how the species might react to advanced technology. John was one of many people they had chosen to save from death, but he was the first one whose companion animal had been able to detect their intervention. Max's ability to sense the Guardian technology was what made John's case special. The Guardians were fascinated by the relationship between humans and dogs, seeing it as evidence that humans could form partnerships with other species based on love rather than domination. This quality was essential for any species that wanted to join the peaceful galactic community. John learned that the device that had saved his life was just a small sample of Guardian medical technology. They had machines that could heal any disease, reverse aging, and even bring people back from death if their treatment was started soon enough. But they also had weapons that could destroy entire planets and tools that could control the minds of whole populations. The choice of whether to share this technology with humanity would depend on how humans reacted to learning about the Guardians' existence. If people tried to steal the technology for military purposes or use it to gain power over others, the Guardians would withdraw their offer and leave Earth to develop on its own. If humans showed wisdom and restraint, they would be given access to knowledge that could solve most of their world's problems. John's role in this test was to be a messenger and an example. Through him, the Guardians would reveal themselves to Earth's governments and offer to share their technology. John would demonstrate how Guardian medical science could be used to help people, and the reaction of human leaders would determine what happened next. The weight of this responsibility frightened John at first. He was just a mechanic from a small town, not a diplomat or scientist. But the Guardians explained that they had chosen him precisely because he was an ordinary person with extraordinary character. They needed someone who would use their gifts to help others rather than to gain fame or power for himself. Dr. Helen Carter became John's closest advisor during this time, helping him understand the medical aspects of what the Guardians had done to his body. The alien technology had not just healed him but had enhanced his natural abilities in ways that would allow him to survive in environments that would kill normal humans. John could now see clearly in complete darkness, hear sounds from much greater distances, and react to dangers faster than any human should be able to. His body processed food and water more efficiently, and he needed less sleep than before. Most remarkably, his immune system had been strengthened to the point where he could probably survive diseases that would be fatal to everyone else. These enhancements were not permanent gifts, but temporary changes that would fade if the Guardian device was removed from his vicinity. The Guardians wanted to show humans what was possible, without making John into something that was no longer human. He was still himself, just a better version of what humans could become with the right help. Alan Ross coordinated with government officials to prepare for the formal contact with the Guardians. Secret meetings were held with leaders from around the world, and preparations were made for the most important diplomatic contact in human history. Everyone involved understood that the decisions made in the coming weeks would affect the future of the entire human species. Meanwhile, Max remained constantly at John's side, serving as a bridge between the human and alien worlds. The dog seemed to understand the Guardians' communications even better than John did sometimes, often reacting to their messages before John had fully received them. The Guardians were as interested in studying Max as they were in communicating with John. Through John, the Guardians explained that they had learned much about human nature by observing the relationships between people and their pets, the unconditional love that dogs showed to humans, and the care that good humans gave to their animals, demonstrated qualities that were essential for a peaceful galactic civilization. John's first public demonstration of Guardian technology was arranged to take place at a major medical center, where he would use knowledge gained from the Guardians to help heal people that conventional medicine could not save. The plan was to start small, helping a few patients with terminal illnesses, and gradually reveal more capabilities as the public became ready to accept the reality of alien contact. But before the public demonstration could happen, John faced a personal test that would prove whether he truly understood the Guardian's message about using power responsibly. News of his miraculous recovery had leaked to the media, and reporters were offering large amounts of money for exclusive interviews about his experience. John also received calls from pharmaceutical companies wanting to study his enhanced blood, and from military contractors interested in his improved physical abilities. Some religious leaders claimed he was either a saint or a demon, and conspiracy theorists accused the government of conducting illegal experiments on citizens. The Guardians watched John's reaction to all this attention carefully. They had seen other species become corrupted by the fame and power that came with being chosen as first contact representatives. How John handled the pressure and temptation would determine whether humanity was ready to receive their full offer of friendship and technology. John made his choice by refusing all the money and publicity opportunities. Instead, he worked with Helen and Alan to create a foundation that would use Guardian knowledge to help people without charging them money or seeking credit for the work. The foundation would be run by doctors and scientists who were committed to healing rather than profit. This decision pleased the Guardians, who told John that he had passed the first part of their test. But they also warned him that bigger challenges were coming. Not everyone would be happy about the existence of alien technology on Earth, and there would be people who would try to take the Guardian devices by force. The Guardians gave John additional tools to protect himself and the technology, including ways to communicate with them instantly if he was in danger. They also began teaching him more advanced concepts that humans would need to understand if they were going to join the galactic community. Max continued to play an important role in these communications, often sensing Guardian messages before the technology delivered them to John. The dog had become a living symbol of the partnership between species that the Guardians valued so highly, and his presence helped to remind John of the simple truth that mattered most. As preparations continued for the public revelation of Guardian contact, John spent quiet moments with Max, remembering the ordinary life they had shared before everything changed. He knew that their old life was gone forever, but he also knew that the love between them was the foundation for everything that would come next. The Guardians had chosen well when they decided to save John Hayes and trust in the loyalty of his faithful companion. Together, John and Max would help determine whether humanity was ready to take its place among the stars, or would remain alone on Earth for generations to come. 3 weeks after John's awakening, the Guardians delivered their formal message to humanity. The communication came through John during a carefully planned meeting at the United Nations building in New York, with representatives from every major nation watching either in person or through secure video connections. John stood at the podium with Max beside him, the Guardian device glowing softly in a protective case nearby. When he began to speak, his voice carried the dual quality that indicated the Guardians were speaking through him as well as with him. "People of Earth," John said, his words being translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "We are the Guardians, and we bring greetings from the community of worlds that exists beyond your planet. We have watched your species develop for many thousands of years, and the time has come to offer you a choice that will determine your future." The message explained that humanity had reached a critical point in its development. In the next 50 years, humans would either learn to use their technology wisely and join the peaceful galactic civilization, or they would follow the path of self-destruction that had claimed so many other promising species. The Guardians offered to share knowledge that could solve most of Earth's problems. They had technology that could cure diseases, clean pollution from the environment, provide unlimited clean energy, and even extend human lifespans to many hundreds of years. But this knowledge came with conditions that were not negotiable. First, the technology could never be used for warfare or to give any nation or group power over others. The Guardians had seen too many worlds destroy themselves when advanced weapons fell into the wrong hands. Any attempt to weaponize Guardian technology would result in the immediate withdrawal of all their support. Second, the benefits of Guardian knowledge must be shared freely with all humans, regardless of their nationality, wealth, or social status. The Guardians would not help create a world where only some people had access to healing and abundance, while others suffered from poverty and disease. Third, humanity must demonstrate that it could work together as a single species, rather than as competing tribes and nations. The problems facing Earth required global cooperation, and the Guardians would only share their technology with a united human civilization. Finally, humans must prove that they could be trusted to protect and nurture other forms of life. The relationship between John and Max was used as an example of the kind of partnership between species that the Guardians valued. Humans would need to show the same care for their planet and all the creatures that lived on it. The Guardians gave humanity 1 year to prove they were ready for these responsibilities. During this time, they would provide a limited amount of their technology through John and a few other carefully chosen representatives. How humans used this initial gift would determine whether they received access to the full range of Guardian knowledge. The reaction to this message was immediate and intense. Some world leaders were excited about the possibilities that Guardian technology represented. Others were suspicious and worried about giving up national sovereignty to alien beings. Military officials from several countries demanded immediate access to Guardian devices for study and potential defense applications. John found himself at the center of a global debate that sometimes turned hostile. Some people viewed him as humanity's savior, while others accused him of being part of an alien invasion plan. Death threats were made against him and Lisa, forcing them to accept government protection for their safety. Despite the controversy, John remained focused on his mission to demonstrate the positive uses of Guardian technology. Working with Dr. Helen Carter and a team of international medical experts, he established healing centers in major cities around the world where Guardian medical knowledge could be used to help people with terminal illnesses. The results were miraculous by human standards, but routine by Guardian measures. Cancers disappeared overnight. Paralyzed patients regained the use of their limbs, and genetic diseases that had plagued families for generations were cured completely. The healing centers treated rich and poor patients equally, charging no money and asking for nothing in return, except that those who were healed would help others in whatever way they could. Max played an important role at the healing centers, serving as both a detector of Guardian technology and a source of comfort for frightened patients. Children especially were drawn to the friendly dog, and many parents said their sick children showed improvement just from spending time with Max before they even received Guardian treatment. But not everyone was pleased with the way the healing centers operated. Pharmaceutical companies complained that free medical care was destroying their business. Some governments worried about the social and economic disruption that would result if people stopped dying from diseases that had always been considered fatal. Military leaders from several nations made secret attempts to steal Guardian devices or capture John for interrogation. These efforts were unsuccessful because the Guardian technology could only function in the presence of the chosen representatives. But the attempts created tension and mistrust between different countries. The Guardians monitored all of these reactions carefully, using the information to evaluate humanity's readiness for full contact. They were encouraged by the positive response from ordinary people, but concerned about the actions of some governments and institutions. 6 months into the trial period, a crisis occurred that tested John's commitment to the Guardian principles. His childhood friend Danny Rodriguez was diagnosed with the same type of cancer that had killed John, and Danny's insurance company refused to pay for the experimental treatments that might save his life. Danny came to John asking for help, but he also brought with him representatives from a major corporation that wanted to buy exclusive rights to Guardian medical technology. They offered John millions of dollars and promised to build healing centers around the world, but only in countries that could afford to pay for the treatments. John was torn between wanting to help his friend immediately and staying true to the Guardian requirement that their technology be shared freely with everyone. The corporate representatives argued that their plan would help more people in the long run by creating a sustainable business model for Guardian medicine. But when John consulted with the Guardians through the communication device, their response was clear. Any attempt to commercialize their technology would be considered a violation of the agreement and would result in the withdrawal of all Guardian support from Earth. John made the difficult decision to refuse the corporate offer and instead work to get Danny accepted for treatment at one of the free healing centers. The process took several weeks longer than if John had accepted the commercial deal, and during that time Danny's condition worsened significantly. Fortunately, Guardian technology was able to heal Danny completely once treatment began, but the delay had been agonizing for John and had tested his faith in the Guardian way of doing things. The experience taught him that following Guardian principles would sometimes require making choices that seemed harsh in the short term but were necessary for the long-term good of humanity. The crisis also demonstrated to the Guardians that John truly understood their message about using power responsibly. Even when faced with the possibility of losing a close friend, he had chosen to protect the integrity of the system, rather than make an exception that could have led to corruption and inequality. As the one-year trial period continued, more Guardian representatives were activated around the world. These individuals, like John, had been saved from death by Guardian technology and enhanced to serve as channels for alien knowledge. Each representative specialized in different areas, such as environmental restoration, energy production, or agricultural improvement. Working together, the Guardian representatives began demonstrating solutions to global problems that had seemed impossible to solve. Polluted rivers were cleaned in days instead of decades, desert areas were turned into fertile farmland, and new energy sources were developed that could power entire cities without producing any waste or pollution. But with each success, the opposition to Guardian involvement on Earth grew stronger. Some religious groups declared that alien technology was evil and should be rejected regardless of its benefits. Nationalist political movements argued that accepting help from aliens would make humanity weak and dependent. Most concerning to John and the other representatives were the increasingly sophisticated attempts to steal or reverse engineer Guardian devices. Several countries had formed secret alliances to share information about alien technology, and there were rumors of black market weapons being developed from Guardian, materials obtained through theft or sabotage. The Guardians warned John that humanity was approaching the point where they would have to make a final decision about Earth's readiness for full contact. The trial period had shown both the best and worst aspects of human nature. and the choice of what to do next would depend on which side proved to be stronger. Max seemed to sense the growing tension in the world around them. The dog stayed closer to John than ever before, and his behavior suggested that he could detect threats that human senses could not perceive. More than once, Max's warnings had prevented attempts to. The final test began exactly 1 year after the Guardians first revealed themselves to humanity. What started as a coordinated global effort to steal Guardian technology quickly escalated into the most dangerous crisis in human history. The alliance of nations that had been secretly working to reverse engineer Guardian devices launched simultaneous attacks on all the healing centers around the world. Military forces surrounded the facilities and demanded that John and the other Guardian representatives surrender their technology for national security purposes. The attacks were carefully timed to happen at the same moment, making it impossible for John and his colleagues to warn each other or coordinate their response. In London, armed soldiers stormed the healing center while patients were receiving treatment. In Tokyo, government agents tried to arrest the Guardian representative during a demonstration of environmental restoration technology. John was at the Cedar Falls facility when the attack came to his location. Federal agents surrounded the building and demanded that he come out with his hands up, bringing the Guardian device with him. They claimed that alien technology posed a threat to national security and that John was under arrest for conspiracy to undermine the United States government. Max sensed the danger before John did, becoming agitated and moving to position himself between his master and the doors. The dog's enhanced senses, developed through exposure to Guardian technology, allowed him to detect the hostile intentions of the people surrounding the building. John tried to contact the other Guardian representatives through the communication device, but found that all channels were being blocked by some kind of interference technology. The attackers had clearly planned this operation carefully, using knowledge gained from their year of studying Guardian systems. Dr. Helen Carter, who was with John at the time of the attack, urged him to surrender rather than risk anyone getting hurt. She pointed out that the Guardian technology could not be used by anyone other than the chosen representatives, so giving up the devices would not actually help the attackers accomplish their goals. But John had learned something during his year of communication with the Guardians that Helen did not know. The devices were not just tools for healing and environmental restoration. They were also tests that measured humanity's moral development, and how humans treated the Guardian representatives would determine the final outcome of the trial period. If John surrendered to the military forces, it would send a message to the Guardians that humans valued power and control more than cooperation and peace. If he resisted, people might be hurt in the conflict that followed. Either choice could lead to the Guardians abandoning Earth and leaving humanity to face its problems alone. John made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of surrendering or fighting, he activated a communication mode in the Guardian device that he had never used before. The device began broadcasting a signal that could be received by every television, radio, and internet connection on Earth. Through this global broadcast, John spoke directly to all of humanity about the choice they were facing. He explained that the attacks on the Guardian representatives were not just attempts to steal alien technology, but were part of the final test that would determine Earth's future. "The Guardians are watching to see how we treat their gift," John said, his voice carrying to billions of people around the world. "They are not interested in our military strength or our ability to reverse engineer their devices. They want to know if we can choose cooperation over competition, healing over harming, and wisdom over power." John revealed that the Guardians had the ability to defend their representatives if they chose to do so, but they were deliberately allowing the attacks to proceed because the human response would determine the final outcome of the trial. If people around the world demanded that their government stop the attacks and respect the Guardian mission, humanity would pass the test. If people supported the military actions or remained silent, the Guardians would conclude that Earth was not ready for advanced technology. The broadcast had an immediate effect on the situation at each Guardian facility. Around the world, crowds of ordinary people began gathering outside the buildings where representatives were under attack. In many cases, these crowds included patients who had been healed by Guardian technology and their families, but they also included people who had never directly benefited from alien knowledge. At the Cedar Falls facility, Hundreds of townspeople arrived within an hour of John's broadcast. They formed a peaceful barrier between the federal agents and the healing center, demanding that the attack be called off. Many of these people had known John his entire life and refused to believe that their neighbor posed any threat to national security. Lisa Hayes, who had been evacuated from the building when the siege began, returned with a group of women from the community. They brought food and water for everyone, including the federal agents, and set up a peaceful protest that lasted through the night. Max played a crucial role in keeping the situation calm. The dog moved freely between the crowds of protesters and the nervous federal agents, somehow communicating to both groups that violence was not necessary. Several agents later said that looking into Max's intelligent eyes had reminded them of their own pets at home and made them question what they were being ordered to do. Similar scenes played out at Guardian facilities around the world. In London, thousands of people surrounded the healing center and refused to leave until the military withdrew. In Tokyo, protesters formed human chains around the building where the Guardian representative was being held, singing songs and carrying signs that read, "Choose love, not war." The global response was not uniformly positive. In some countries, government propaganda convinced people that the Guardian representatives were dangerous foreign agents who needed to be controlled. Military forces in these locations succeeded in capturing Guardian devices, but found that the technology immediately stopped functioning once it was separated from its chosen representative. As the standoff continued into its second day, something unexpected happened that changed the dynamic of the entire situation. Children around the world began experiencing shared dreams in which they communicated with the Guardians directly. These children, many of whom had been healed by Guardian technology or had pets similar to Max, woke up with detailed knowledge about the Guardian civilization and its peaceful intentions. They spoke on television and internet broadcasts, describing the beautiful worlds they had seen in their dreams and the kind, wise beings who wanted to help humanity grow and learn. The children's testimonies had a powerful effect on public opinion because their sincerity and innocence were obvious to everyone who heard them speak. Many adults who had been skeptical about Guardian intentions were convinced by the clear, simple words of children who could not possibly be part of any conspiracy or deception. John realized that the Guardians had been preparing for this moment throughout the entire trial year. By healing children and exposing them to Guardian technology, they had created a generation of young ambassadors who could speak for them when the adult world became corrupted by fear and power struggles. On the third day of the crisis, the tide began to turn decisively in favor of the Guardian mission. Soldiers and government agents at several facilities refused orders to use force against peaceful protesters. Some military units openly defected and joined the crowds protecting the Guardian representatives. The breakthrough came when a video went viral showing Max and John working together to heal a young girl who had been injured during one of the attacks. The girl had been caught in a crowd surge at the London facility and had suffered serious injuries that local doctors said would leave her permanently disabled. John and Max traveled to London through a network of supporters who helped them avoid capture by hostile forces. Using Guardian medical technology in front of television cameras from around the world, they healed the girl completely in less than an hour. The image of the faithful dog sitting beside John while he used alien technology to help a hurt child became a symbol that transcended all the political and military complications of the situation. People who had never cared about Guardian technology suddenly understood what the choice between wisdom and power really meant. Government leaders who had ordered the attacks found themselves facing massive protests from their own citizens. Military commanders received direct orders from heads of state to cease operations against Guardian facilities and to allow the representatives to continue their work. But the most important change was not in government policy, but in the hearts and minds of ordinary people around the world. Millions of humans had chosen to stand up for principles of peace and cooperation, even when it meant opposing their own governments and risking personal consequences. The Guardians had seen what they needed to see. Humanity had been tested under the most difficult circumstances and had ultimately chosen wisdom over power. The species was ready to take the next step in its development and join the community of worlds that stretched across the galaxy. John received the message while he was still in London, with Max sleeping beside him after their long 6 months after humanity passed the Guardian test. The world had transformed in ways that seemed like magic to previous generations. The healing centers had expanded into research facilities where human and guardian scientists worked together to solve problems that had plagued Earth for centuries. Cancer, heart disease, and hundreds of other illnesses were now curable with treatments that took hours instead of months. Environmental restoration projects had begun reversing climate change and pollution damage at a pace that amazed even the most optimistic experts. Desert regions were blooming with new plant life, and the oceans were cleaner than they had been in over a century. John Hayes found himself in a role he had never imagined when he was just a mechanic in Cedar Falls. As humanity's first official ambassador to the Guardian Council, he traveled between Earth and the Guardian homeworld through transportation, technology that moved faster than light and made the journey feel like stepping through a doorway. The Guardian homeworld was beautiful, beyond anything John had seen in his dreams during the early days of contact. Cities of crystal and light stretched across landscapes that looked like gardens, and the air itself seemed to glow with gentle energy that made everyone who breathed it feel peaceful and healthy. Max made the journey with John, becoming the first Earth animal to visit another planet. The Guardians were fascinated by the dog's intelligence and loyalty, and they learned much about human nature by studying the bond between John and his companion. Max seemed to adapt to alien environments even better than John did, as if his enhanced senses helped him understand the new world intuitively. During his first visit to the Guardian Council, John learned that Earth was the 47th world to pass the test and join the galactic community. Each of the other species had faced similar choices between wisdom and destruction, and each had found its own way to prove that it could handle advanced technology responsibly. The Guardians introduced John to representatives from some of these other civilizations, and he was amazed by the diversity of intelligent life that existed in the galaxy. Some species looked similar to humans, while others were so different that communication required special translation devices. But all of them shared the common values of peace, cooperation, and respect for life that had allowed them to join the galactic community. John learned that the Guardian civilization was ancient beyond human comprehension, having developed advanced technology millions of years before humans had even evolved on Earth. But they had not always been wise and peaceful. Early in their history, they had made many of the same mistakes that humanity was just learning to avoid. The Guardians had fought devastating wars, damaged their planet's environment, and nearly destroyed themselves with weapons of incredible power. Their survival and eventual wisdom had come through learning to value cooperation over competition and life over profit. They had become Guardians because they wanted to help other species avoid the mistakes that had almost cost them their existence. The technology that the Guardians shared with Earth was only a small portion of what they had developed over millions of years. They revealed new capabilities gradually, always ensuring that humanity was ready for each level of advancement before introducing more powerful tools. Within the first year after contact, human lifespans began extending dramatically as Guardian medical technology eliminated the aging process. People could choose to remain physically young and healthy for centuries, giving them time to learn skills and explore interests that would have been impossible in a normal human lifetime. The economic systems of Earth underwent massive changes as Guardian. Technology eliminated scarcity and the need for many types of work. Energy became free and unlimited. Food could be produced without farms or factories, and most manufactured goods could be created instantly from basic materials using Guardian fabrication technology. But perhaps the most important change was in human consciousness itself. Exposure to Guardian knowledge and technology seemed to awaken dormant potentials in the human mind, allowing people to think more clearly, learn more quickly, and connect with each other in ways that had previously been impossible. John noticed these changes in himself during his first months as ambassador. His memory became perfect, his understanding of complex concepts improved dramatically, and he developed an intuitive sense for the emotions and intentions of other people. Most remarkably, he found that he could communicate with Max almost telepathically, understanding the dog's thoughts and feelings as clearly as if they were spoken words. Max experienced similar enhancements, becoming more intelligent and aware while still retaining his essential dog nature. The loyal German Shepherd became a bridge between human and Guardian cultures, helping both species understand each other better. Children especially were drawn to Max, and his presence at diplomatic meetings often helped resolve tensions and misunderstandings. The process of integrating Guardian technology into human society was not without challenges. Some people struggled to adapt to a world where traditional concepts of work, money, and national boundaries were becoming obsolete. Others worried about losing their human identity as their minds and bodies were enhanced by alien technology. Religious leaders around the world grappled with theological questions raised by contact with an ancient alien civilization. Some saw the Guardians as angels or divine messengers, while others worried that humanity was becoming too dependent on outside help instead of solving its own problems. John worked with these various groups to help them understand that Guardian technology was meant to enhance human potential, not replace it. The aliens were teachers and guides, not rulers or gods. Humanity would ultimately determine its own destiny, but now it would do so with knowledge and tools that could help it avoid the mistakes that had destroyed so many other civilizations. 2 years after first contact, the Guardians announced that Earth was ready for the next phase of development. Human explorers would be invited to visit other worlds in the galactic community, and representatives from other species would come to Earth to establish permanent embassies and cultural exchange programs. John was chosen to lead the first human expedition to explore the galaxy, a mission that would last several years and would establish Earth's place in the broader community of worlds. Max would accompany him, serving as both companion and representative of the animal species that had played such an important role in humanity's development. The night before departure, John and Max returned to Cedar Falls for a final visit to the cemetery where everything had begun. The grave where John had been buried was now marked with a simple monument, honoring the loyalty and love that had changed the course of human history. Lisa Hayes, who had chosen to undergo Guardian life extension treatments and would join John on future missions, stood beside them as they said goodbye to their old life. She marveled at how different everything was from that gray October morning when she had thought she was burying her husband forever. Dr. Helen Carter was there too, now serving as Earth's director of Guardian medical programs and continuing the work of healing that had started in John's small-town garage. She scratched Max behind the ears and thanked him for being stubborn enough to bark at a coffin until someone listened. As they prepared to leave Earth for the stars, John reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a dog's refusal to accept that his master was gone and had led to humanity's acceptance into a community of worlds that spanned the galaxy. The Guardians had been right to choose John and Max as their representatives, not because they were exceptional in obvious ways, but because they demonstrated the simple virtues that made any species worthy of advanced technology: loyalty, love, courage, and the determination to help others even when it required personal sacrifice. Standing on the observation deck of the first human Guardian starship, John and Max looked out at the vast expanse of space that would be their new home. Behind them, Earth glowed blue and green, healing and whole, protected by the same love that had driven a dog to bark at a coffin until someone understood what he was trying to say. The journey to the stars was just beginning, but John knew that humanity would never again face its challenges alone. They had proven themselves worthy of friendship and assistance from beings whose wisdom and technology could help them solve any problem they encountered. Most importantly, they had learned that the greatest technologies were worthless without the wisdom to use them well, and that wisdom came not from intelligence or power, but from the simple ability to love and care for others. A man and his dog had taught the galaxy that lesson, and the galaxy had welcomed them home. The miracle that no one had expected was not just John's return from death, but humanity's awakening to its true potential. As the starship accelerated toward distant worlds filled with wonders beyond imagination, Max wagged his tail and settled down beside his master for the greatest adventure of all. The dog who had refused to let death have the final word had helped humanity write the first chapter of its galactic story, and that story would continue for as long as love and loyalty endured among the stars.